The Human Development Index is a statistic that is assigned to each country in the world. It takes the component indices of a country's life expectancy, education, and GDP per capita. Once these stats are all taken into account, a final number or HDI is given to that country. The higher the HDI of a country, the higher the stats taken into account are, meaning they are highly developed. When analysing the Australian and Ethiopian HDI statistics, it is clear to see that there is a huge gap between each of the countries. In Australia, the Human Development Index for 2017 was 0.939, an incredibly high number that put Australia in the very high human development category, and was ranked as the third highest in the world out of 189 countries and territories. Now when analysing the HDI value of Ethiopia, the gap between Australia and less developed countries can be seen. The Ethiopian HDI value for 2017 was 0.463. This granted the country a position into the low human development category and positioned it as the 173rd best HDI country in the world out of 189 countries. This graph shows the GDP per capita of both Australia, shown in red, and Ethiopia, shown in blue. As can be seen in the graph, the first recorded GDP per capita for Australia shows that in 1960 the country's GDP per capita was at $19.4 thousand. This is significantly less than the most recently recorded figure, which gives Australia's GDP per capita in 2017 as being $55.9 thousand, placing it in the top 10 countries for GDP per capita in the world. As well as showing the Australian statistics, the graph shows the Ethiopian statistics as well. When analysing them, the considerably large gap between both countries can be seen. The first recorded GDP per capita of Ethiopia shows an incredibly low figure of only $228 per capita in 1981. When compared to Australia's GDP per capita for the same year of $30,400, the extreme poverty in Ethiopia can be seen. This massive gap has only remained as large, with the 2017 GDP per capita for Ethiopia only increasing to $550. The following graph shows the population growth of both Australia and Ethiopia, Australia being red and Ethiopia being blue. As can be seen, there is a significantly large gap between the two, with Ethiopia being much larger than Australia. The 2018 population for Ethiopia was around 108 million, and the Australian population for 2018 was around 24.8. This is interesting because while Ethiopia has a much larger population than Australia, Australia has a much higher ranking on the HDI index and also has a much higher GDP per capita than Ethiopia. This highlights the extreme poverty Ethiopia lives in, as well as the harsh conditions for its large population, compared to Australia, who has a much better quality of life with higher GDP per capita for the lower population.
Ethiopia compared to Australia. Health indicators. Health in Ethiopia reaches an all-time low in comparison to Australia's standards and can be seen in the following statistics. If you were to live in Ethiopia, statistics show that you would die 21.32 years sooner. The life expectancy in Ethiopia is 60.75 years, while in Australia it is 82.07 years. Also, you'd be 12.6 more times likely to die in Ethiopia of infancy, 2.9 times more likely to be unemployed, 13 times more likely to have HIV/AIDS, and 7.4 times more likely to be murdered. The current Ethiopian stats make Australia look like heaven, as the stats show that good health is not developed and the mean to survive is poor. If the Ethiopians people of chances of surviving so low, then the mean for development to improve the country cannot be achieved. Thus, the economy will suffer and consequently no economic power globally will be achieved. At the rate of these current statistics, the development of Ethiopia will be on standby, holding back the economy. Education indicator. Of Australians aged 20 to 64 years, 9.8 million or 66.7 had attained a non-school qualification. Of those without a non-school qualification, more than half had a Year 12 or almost equivalent qualification. Almost three quarters, 71.4% of those who were employed had a non-school qualification. 31.4% had a bachelor degree or above. Of Australians aged 15 to 64, almost one-fifth of Australians were currently studying. Of those who were currently studying for a non-school qualification, 41.6 were completing a bachelor degree, 13.5% were doing postgraduate degrees, 12.8% were studying for a certificate 3. The most popular field of study for a non-school qualification was society and culture, followed by management, commerce, health of apprentices and trainees. 84% were male compared with 16% female. In Ethiopia, 32% of children of official primary school ages were out of school. 34% of boys of primary school age are out of school compared to 31% of girls of the same age. Nearly 44% of female youth of secondary school age are out of school compared to 42% of male youth at the same age. For youth of secondary school age, the biggest disparity can be seen between the poorest and the richest youth. Furthermore, the contrast between Ethiopia and Australia's education creates a downpour of Ethiopia's economy. Food intake. Moreover, the food problem also hits an all-time low in Ethiopia, with statistics showing an average food intake of 1,960 joules, whereas in Australia, 3,220 joules are taken on average. The impact of this is high and is evident in the ranking of the most malnourished countries, with Ethiopia being in the top 10. In addition, the mean to produce more food in Ethiopia is a struggle as the economy is poor and development is unable to take place in order to produce more goods and resources for people. All in all, the comparison between Australia and Ethiopia is undoubtedly poor, as Ethiopia is a top famine country.